Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltia's Gaming with an updated for my Magic Dragonknight build, Laceration, specifically for player versus player content in the Elder Scrolls Online. This is what I've been using on and off stream for the Wolfhunter DLC patch update, and I wanted to share with you a couple of skill, morph, gear changes that I've been using. More or less is the same, pretty easy and accessible to get, but some things have changed, making Magic Dragonknight still ridiculously fun and easy to play. Let's get to it. Okay, so Magic Dragonknight, what has really changed since the previous patch? A couple gear items and then really a skill change that made a lot of big difference in this specific build and what I use, specifically dropping Vampire or putting it at stage 1 anyway. So the gear looks sick, don't it? Basically what I did is I got rid of Elusive Mist for the Vampire. Reason why? Reflective Plate got changed. So the morph that I really never went with, Reflective Plate now gains immunity to snares and immobilization for 2 seconds. So it's a costly way to essentially get rid of movement impairing effects, but it's super effective. So I put Sword and Board as my defensive bar, not my offensive like in the previous patch. I put Reflective Plate back here. So this build, and specifically how I play, does require a lot of bar swaps. So you can modify it, maybe put something on the front or on the back, depending on your play style, and make it maybe a little bit easier for you. But it is going to require a lot of bar swaps to get rid of these snares and immobilizations that were the bane of the Dragonknight. So a lot of people still use Vampire and they use Elusive Mist for this, but I just found it much more effective to use Reflective Plate because you get the reflect along with the movement impairing effect here of 2 seconds. So if you're immobilized, you cast it. If you're going to go charge into battle, you cast it. It's super effective, making this build a lot more fun. They don't have to rely on Vampire. So that frees up a skill slot, really. And Cauterize, my friend Derek and Quantum both talked about how great this was, and I didn't really believe them until I started playing with it. So essentially it heals you or an ally, but when you're playing solo, it's you. And you'd be surprised at how often this heals an ally that's really low health. So I have a way to heal myself and others without using a resto staff, getting all the benefits to block with Sword and Board. Really cool. Not to mention you get spell critical. So more offensively, you could put this on the front bar if you want, but I kind of pre-buff and I use it on my back bar. So essentially 3 heals in 15 seconds. It really increased my survivability. Alongside dropping Vampire down to stage 1, I still haven't determined if I'm going to go get rid of it, but at least you have the option now, because Undeath Supernatural Recovery is really nice, but I just found it easier to survive with all the Dawnbreakers going out, dropping Vamp to stage 1 at least. Then the armor buff, of course. This is really nice. You can cast it beforehand, but also casting it while you're in the thick of things does a lot of damage, and the radius is 10 meters. So that sprays in a huge radius, doing a lot of damage over time. Plus, it's a great way to get stealthers out of stealth, because it does the damage in the AoE. In 10 meters, you'd be surprised at how many people this hit. This can add up to a lot of damage. And then the last ability here, my active bar is Engulfing Flames. So this is my flex spot, what you could flex in and out depending on the context in the fight. Flame damage, but really that added 10% more damage from all fire effects does a massive amount of damage. I'm telling you, it says 10%, but I don't know, it just mathematically doesn't add up. It feels like it does a lot more, but hey, math, right? So you can swap this in and out, but I like it. Now it is on my melee bar, but when I close the distance or someone's pressuring me, I cast it after my buffs, and I love using it. Something else I've experimented with, especially with the gear set that I'm using, is Empowering Chains. This grants you major expedition. It's really cool because if you have that Zon 2 piece that really needs to be near them in order to be effective, it's a way to stay on top of the enemy. So it's a gap closer, it hits hard, it gives you 2 light attack and powers, and major expedition. So if you're looking for more mobility, you cast basically Reflective Plate first, charge in with Empowering Change, light attack whip, and this thing hits really hard. So that's something that I've used right there as well. The other thing that I used is Generation. You can use whatever morph you want, but I like this added healing. You can put on other people. Gives you the spell power buff, so you can rely on tripods for something else, and it does a decent amount of healing, especially if you're light and heavy attacking in between. So it's a really strong thing to put here as well. There's just a lot of options, and I would just say experiment with it. But like if you're really trying to be aggressive in damage dealing, this really helps. Because remember, a lot of the healing that we do comes from how much damage we're doing on our front bar. And I guess I forgot to mention coagulating blood. I did some experimenting with this. You're going to see in the gear section here a little bit later. I went with something a little bit maybe odd for some people, but I'll explain it. Essentially, you read the tooltip and it says that it scales off of max magic and spell damage. So what I did is I tested it with gear sets, giving me more spell damage, more max magic, and I fell off cliffs and just seeing how much I could heal for. And it did seem that max magic really increase this, but it was very, very hard to determine because that's not really an accurate way to test things. If you're falling off the same height, you know, did you heal at the exact same time? It was very, very hard to test this, and having someone beat on me to the exact same HP threshold is very, very hard. But if you read the tooltip and assume it's correct and it scales off of that, not max health, then more max magic on your back bar is effective. So really, the only time we're going to want to use coagulating blood is when we're very low health, around that 25-30% threshold, because otherwise it's not an effective heal. The lower your health is, the more effective this heal can be. Another thing that I've done before is put structured entropy, the other morph of this, essentially giving me more max health on this bar, and then I went with endurance, sword, and shield to give me even more max health. And so my health pool essentially would be lowered significantly in comparison to my front bar, healing bigger and then bar swapping and getting the same advantage. I tried that again, but it didn't seem to work, to be honest. So I would say experiment with it and base your gear selection choices on your back bar off of how coagulating blood is scaling that day, because it just seems weird. I can't really get a definitive answer of my testing. So someone out there, I'm sure in the comments knows, right? But anyways, sword and shield, the back bar ultimate. I experimented with something really cool. That's the Sigic Order's temporal guard. So while slotted, you get minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 8%. It's really, really useful on the back bar when you're blocking to have this, but I was wondering if the magic, stamina, and health positions that were reverted 4 seconds ago would also proc your Battle Roar passive, which essentially is giving you tons of resources. So I figured, oh, this would just be like a heal to full, and every Dragonknight would use it. Well, come to find out, it didn't work that way. But there is a nice benefit for those folks looking for something to slot Sigic order-wise on your back bar, but I know not everyone has the DLC, so I decided not to go with it. Sword and Board Spell Wall is really, really good defensive ultimate still. It's cheap, it reflects, though it's a little bit redundant since we already have a reflect that we rely upon heavily. Another awesome alternative, Magma Shell, gives you, it's like you can't die for 10 seconds. But it has a 200 ultimate cost, so it's kind of few and far between to get there. Another thing that I've used is, of course, Bats. Devouring Swarm, great AoE. Now you have to be stage 4 for it to really be effective a lot of times. Great AoE, it heals you, but you know, it has some counterplay, so not always the best, but those are kind of like the 3 or 4 options that I experimented with. But typically, like I said, I like doing 1 offensive ultimate, 1 defensive ultimate, and all around the Sword and Board spell wall is the best. Essentially, using a lot of block reduction for the Sword and Board and pairing it with this ultimate made it my back bar of choice. Front bar here is our offensive ultimate. So let's get to the weird skill first, and that is Elemental Train. I really couldn't find a way, even in this patch, and this is made for no CP, mind you, to sustain without it. It's just super, super hard to sustain without it. And that it also reduces spell resistance, adds a lot of damage too. That and Engulfing Flames, if you just have those 2 things up on a single target, you'd be surprised at how nasty it is. You'll notice it doesn't have a cost either. So when you're closing the gap or someone's pressuring you or whatnot, you can apply it to a bunch of different enemies. Yes, it can be cleansed and so forth, but the long duration, the free cost, the increased damage with the spell resistance makes it worth slotting for me. So I really like this for sustaining and no CP specifically. And if you have like a pocket healer or something else, you know, maybe you could swap it in or out. And you could also put Reflect here and maybe slot Burning Embers on your back bar if you want maybe a little bit more mobility on your front. But I'm bar swapping a lot, and that's okay for me. Speaking of Burning Embers, you'll notice the setup is more for Battlegrounds, no CP, and then solo play. So Burning Embers is really, really fantastic for that because you can swipe it and re-swipe over that 10 seconds or let it expire for a monster heal. It's constant pressure. It has low cost. It's going to be a great heal when the duration runs out or you need it without back bar swapping. It allows you to be offensive and get a nice amount of healing back. So you'll see me typically swiping folks after I apply the debuff. I'll swipe them. Then I'll go into kind of my rotation and pressure. But Burning Embers is great. Now, if I'm doing Cyrodiil and I'm getting Zerg down and whatnot, I'll swap Draw Essence in. So this is really nice because it does do a heal up front for the damage caused, and it does a massive amount of damage in a radius and gives you back magic. But it's really not effective one-on-one, 1v2s, and so forth. So it just really depends on the context. You're doing big, huge keep fights, and you're doing Cyrodiil, great, use this here. But otherwise, Battlegrounds, if I need a solid heal, I'm going to put Burning Embers on. Moving on to Talons, this looks really familiar to almost the rest of the builds I've played. Burning Towers, what can you say? Tons of magic cost, but the immobilization, the flame damage, and the synergy make it just one of the best abilities you can use. It's going to be really, really useful when we pair this with our Zon 2-piece. I'm going to talk here in a little bit. But immobilizations, locking down either a single target or stunning them appropriately is the name of the game. So there's no reason to swap this out. The other morph is good, but the flame damage, the added pressure that this can do AoE or single target is too much for me to pass up. Flame Lash, it's really, really good still. The way you're going to want to use this is your main spammable attack, and you're trying to essentially proc Power Lash by setting a target off balance, immobilize, or stunned. So immobilize right here. We also have an immobilize and stun on Fossilize here. You can also bash a target to set them off balance, and that's going to allow you to do a double whip. The double whip's going to hit harder. It's gonna heal you like a truck, and I'm telling you, the more damage you can do with this sucker, the more heal you're gonna get. And it can occur every 3 seconds. So between Burning Embers and proccing Flame Lash a lot of times, and your Battle Roar, you should be relying on that more than like burst healing or shield stacking. Though you can swap things in and out depending on your playstyle. So in summary here, this is your main spammable. This is what you're going to use to pressure folks. You're going to want to set it up along with your Zon helmet so you're optimally using this to get heals every 3 seconds or so that you can. Last but not least, Fossilize, one of the best stuns in the game. It's single target. It can drop block. So it cannot be blocked or dodged. It's just super, super effective. Now it has an 8-meter range. So as you can see, the downside of this build is really a gap closer as it is right now. And if you're struggling with that, I would drop Engulfing, put it there. Because you're going to want to close the distance and find a way to do that. Fossilize, double proc Flame Lash. Once they're unstunned and they can get out of it, well, guess what? 3 seconds later, now you're going to immobilize them with Burning Talons, double proc Flame Lash. 3 seconds later, they're stunnable. Guess what? Fossilize, double proc Flame Lash. So you're kind of bouncing between these. Can they be stunned? When in doubt, use Fossilize, double proc Flame Lash. Can they be immobilized? Yep. Burning Talons, double proc Flame Lash. So what that's going to allow you to do in combination with Burning Embers is to pressure a single target without burning through all of your stamina holding block and out heal their damage that they're returning to you. So the more aggressive you play towards 1 or 2 players, the more healing you'll have coming in. So it's kind of like a Stam Sorkin crit surge. You just want to pressure, and go back to using your buffs when appropriate. Okay, the Zon helmet. Now, I was late to the party because I was off doing other things and getting surgeries and all that sort of stuff. And so I didn't really get a chance to play with this until recently, and it's just freaky powerful. You got to set this up, though, so when it procs, you want to have your immobilizations and stuns ready, because good players that don't know what's going on, it's going to proc and you're just going to AFK, slam your keyboard, and they're going to die. But good players are going to find ways to get out of the beam, and it's cut down to 8 meters. So you need to be ready for this. When it procs, that's when I like to immobilize people. So most of the time I'll be fighting someone. I'll be fighting someone here. Now it procs, then I immobilize. So I mobilize, and I get my 2 lashes in. This is a can't be stunned, but I'm waiting for it to proc specifically, then immobilize, then stun. If you do it in that order and that kind of philosophy, they're going to be much, much more likely to stay within the beam and just not being able to out heal it. Remember, this effect can happen once every 18 seconds, so really good players will kind of have a mental countdown in their head of when they've seen it proc and then how long they have to basically play around with it. So once that 20-30 second threshold in your mind has gone away, then you kind of let a player just, you kind of pressure them without stunning them or immobilizing them. You don't want to give them an immunity. And then when it's up, bang, that's when you immobilize, pressure them with the light attacks and heavy attacks. It procs. You just burn them to the ground. This thing is so much fun. And I think the 8-meter range is fair right now, but it's single target. So once again, this might not fit every single person's play style. So play around with it. Scoria is still really, really good. Very, very bursty, hard to avoid. Some people use the Grothar if you're doing those big, huge Cyrodiil fights. But for solo play, Battlegrounds, I really like Zon. It's so much fun. And it looks cool, dude. Like Predator or something. It's sick. And then the 5-piece Shackle Breaker. Look, I don't know if this is the best set ever, right? But it works and it's effective. It's pretty easy to get. You can craft it. So that's why I went with Shacklebreaker as a 5-piece. And I went 5 heavy, 2 light. I won't experiment with the light, and I did a lot more damage because of the passive, the 5-piece passive, but I just got destroyed a lot more. So, you know, if you're playing me in Cyrodiil or Battlegrounds, you know, you're going to take a lot of pressure. And you got to be able to survive and do damage. So the 5 heavy, 2 light was kind of the balance for me of surviving and doing good damage. But if you're not getting pressured that much and you just want all out damage, go light. But Shacklebreaker is a good 5-piece to start with. And if you're finding you're not doing enough damage or you have too much sustain, or switch it out, experiment. But Shacklebreaker is good for most players to get a good feel for it and start from there. Okay, now controversial. Burning Spellweave. Deltia, why the hell are you using Burning Spellweave over the other ones? Okay, we'll go through this. So you can see here, I have this innate axiom, which is what everyone told me to use, and that was the greatest thing ever. And I experimented with it. Now, Cyrodiil is about burst, doing a lot of damage in a small window. So if you have that premise in mind, Burning Spellweave does that to a better regard than a axiom. Reason why is, yes, it has more spell damage, that's obvious, but the burning status effect is really, really powerful. I mean, it can do 1,000 damage per second on a player just as an extra dot, an extra pressure mechanic. So not only is it the spell damage, and yes, it has a chance to proc, I get it, it's not always up, but when it is up and that burning spell, that burning burning status effect applies, it is a lot of pressure. Now, I understand not everyone's going to want to have Burning Spellweave to farm it and whatever. And if you like Innate Axiom, by all means, use it. Same thing with the Sun. That's another good set. War Maiden. There's all sorts of different ones you can use, and it's not like really you have to use a specific one. But for my testing and what I liked, I did like Burning Spellweave more. And it cost me an arm and a leg to make this, so hey, send me mats. Just kidding, not really. But I really, really liked it, and I did go with the Escapist Poison. Nirnhone trait seemed to be the best. You can do an enchant, especially if you want to do fire and on it infused. But I like that the immobilizations and unstoppable with the poison procced frequently, allowing me a little bit more with the mobility. Because if I can't move on a magic build, I'm dead. So experiment with the traits and whatever thing else you want. And another benefit to Burning Spellweave is when the spell damage does proc, you go back to your back bar and you can have the benefit of another 2-piece, which I went with Willpower. Like I said before, I used this setup because during my coagulating blood testing, it did give me a little bit more healing back. I could be completely wrong, and it could be, you know, well, I've been wrong before. But I tried it with more health, didn't work. Tried it with more magic, it worked. So experiment with it. When in doubt, Innate Axiom 5-piece on the front bar and the back bar is a great way to go about it. But for me, I like the Burning Spellweave Willpower setup. This isn't a champion point build, so I'm not even going to show you my champion points because they're going to be all screwed up. So I don't even know what the best champion points are now. So I would say experiment with it. A couple things that will help you out quite a bit is your Atronach Mundastone. I drop Vampire to stage 1. I would say if you're not using Mistform, experiment with stage 1, see if you like it. You're going to have a little bit less resources sustained, but you're going to have a lot more survivability in my opinion. And then Clockwork Citrus Fillet, I don't know. Either way, this is the optimal food to use. Now, it's going to give you a lower stamina pool than I typically run. So in Battlegrounds, it's about 12k, and my health is pretty low, about 22, 23k. So you might have to play around with attributes, take a little bit out of magic and put some in health and stamina if you find yourself getting nuked all the time. But I don't play this build blocking a whole lot unless I'm pressured and go to my back bar. What I'm trying to do with this build is have enough healing through Flame Lash, Burning Embers, and Cauterize that my pressuring is what's healing me, keeping me sustained. So I'm really offensive. Now I need to be melee to do that. So line of sighting, constant bar swapping. So it's not necessarily the easiest build to play. It's going to take some time, but it's a lot of fun now. The Dragonknight's really, really cool. And if I play in a group, it's really fun to just drop Burning Embers and put Draw Essence on. And then even then I could go on my back bar and put like Proxy Det and jump into a group of people and just lock them down with Talons and draw Essence. Oh my God, dude, it's so much fun. So it's fun solo, it's fun in a group, and the Dragonknight feels like this. Like I can hop on it, I can be effective right away, and I'm still messing with my Templar to get it to feel the same, but I just haven't felt that way. The biggest change for me, making it so much more fun, is that reflective plate change. So kudos to Zosta giving a class that really struggled with this 2 mobility tools now to pair. Immunity, and then bang, I can just jump into fights with empowering chains right here. Love it, love it, love it. But just wanted a quick update on the Magic Dragonknight. So I'll be playing other classes, trying to collect the new gear sets. Really hopped on my Stam Templar and shredded people with Steel Tornado, so hopefully I'll do a quick update on that. But yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it as always. And hey, if you got some Dragonknight tips that have been working for you, share them in the comments. Thanks for watching.